Hi everyone, welcome to week 8. We are almost done with this 9 weeks, and I want you to notice that because there's a couple of things going on here. I'm starting out one, normally I start on the calendar, but I'm starting back one because I want you to see some things in case you didn't know this. All the stuff from August goes into a folder in August, all the stuff in September goes in a folder in September, and so if you're looking for stuff, like if you're missing an assignment, or you need to go back and look at a calendar, you have to go back and look at it that way. They're in there, and for instance, some of you guys still haven't handed in the notebook check for the first 9 weeks, or the first notebook check, and I'm actually about to do check number 2, and that's here. So you have to go back into a Dropbox because a lot of you guys are getting a 0 in that. You have to be keeping notes. Those are the guided notes that I give you every week, and you have to be printing them out, filling them out as you go through the tutorials, and then giving them to me this next week. It's actually not going to be this week. I'm just getting ahead of the game. I need them by October 15th, which is the middle of next week, so that I can give you a grade. That's the last day of the 9 weeks, and I don't take anything after that. Okay. So that's going to go here. You just click on it. There's a place to submit it, and that's it. I'm going to go into October, into the October calendar here, like we normally do, and I'm going to press the funny little thingy right there to expand this, and we are on week 8. Week 8 is not going to be as hard as you think. We have an activity, we have a tutorial with the guided notes, and we have some things in between that I'd like to talk about. First thing I want to go through is the activity. It is very quick, pretty straightforward, but it's going to be different. So this is like a lab. This is a lab you do at home, and it's the effects of exercise on muscles and heart rate. The first thing I want to tell you is that if you have some medical reason, some documented medical reason that you can't get your heart rate increased, please tell me. If you have some type of disability in which you can't accomplish this, please tell me. Don't just not do this. Please send me a text so that I can look into it and make sure. The bottom line is that I need you guys doing a very light amount of exercise. I think you squeeze like a tennis ball or some type of Nerf ball for a few minutes just to see something. It is not that difficult. Alright, so let's go on. We're going to take a look at the objectives here. The objectives for this exercise: in this activity you'll plan and conduct an investigation to explain how exercise affects heart rates and muscle activity. During exercise, your body lets you know how hard you're working, your muscles contract, your breathing increases, your heart rate changes. This is something that your body does. Now keep in mind, this is done just like everything is done at the cellular level. Your muscles are made out of cells. Okay, they need oxygen, they need food, and they need it rapidly. So your body has an entire network of other cells that create tissues, that create organs, and these cells, tissues, and organs all go together to be able to accomplish a task. If you swim, you're using muscles. Those are made out of cells. You're using your skeletal system that's made out of cells. You're using your cardiovascular system, and that's the main focus of what we're going here, to move blood and oxygen that contains oxygen and food and water to your cells. So it all works together. In this activity, you're going to observe the changes in your pulse and muscles during physical activity and relate your results to your body's internal mechanisms that maintain homeostasis. And yes, I want you to look up that word. You need to know what it means. So here's the hard part. Here's where you're actually going to do some physical activity. So the first rule here is stay safe. If you have a health condition that you know this activity would aggravate or worsen, you can modify the activity by talking to your parents or perhaps your doctor. You can ask a friend or a family member to do the activity for you, and you can record the results from there. Part A is data collection and hypothesis. Follow through here. Answer this. You think about it. What do you think will happen is what it's kind of getting down to. You will measure your pulse during 3 different activities. First, measure your pulse at rest. Now, it shows you how to do it. If you don't know how to do it, there's a YouTube video, but you can use what's called the carotid artery here and just find your pulse and just count. And you can use or you could use what's called the brachial pulse, which is right there on your wrist. By the way, you're only going to need a few things here: paper, pencil, and a stopwatch. And you can find a stopwatch on your phone. It's even one on your Chromebook. If you have Chrome open, just type in stopwatch and it'll take you to a Chrome app. So essentially what you're going to do is choose 2 activities that you can do for about 10 minutes, and you're going to then there's going to be 3 total data. You're going to tell me what we call your resting pulse, which means you're rested, right? And then you're going to do 2 things such as walking and jogging. Just for example, if you can come up with another one, go right ahead. Walking around for 10 minutes, that's easy. Just if you can't get outside, just pace back and forth in the living room. And then you know, I don't know, do something else for 10 minutes. It could be sitting on the floor and maybe doing planking or something for 10 minutes. Planking is actually very good for you. So here you're going to write down your 2 activity choices, and it could be walking or jogging, for example. Okay. Question number 2, you're going to actually fill out this table. So what you're going to do is you're going to, when you're resting, you're going to take your pulse for 10 seconds. So you're going to count it. Let's say you get 11 beats in 10 seconds, then that goes here. And then how many beats per minute would that be? So you do a calculation. Basically just multiply this times 6. You're also going to find out your average. You're going to do that for the 3 trials. 1 for resting, 1 for walking, for example, and 1 for planking. For example, that's what I gave you. If you'd like to do something different than those 2, please go right ahead. Even something cool like playing ping pong or playing pool or swimming in the swimming pool, or I don't care, vacuuming the floor. Just anything. You know, I would say walking would be 1, but anything else would go right there. And so this is an example of the table. Now, how much do you think your pulse will increase during the 2 activities? I don't know why they're answering that. That should be the 3rd question, not the 2nd. Perform the 2 activities. Oh, I see. All right. So you're gonna. This is just a. Okay. Well, anyway, keep going through this, and you'll figure it out. I guess this is just a copy of the information up top. I don't know. So I think they got this off a little bit, but you can do this. This isn't that hard. And then you got to answer some questions down here. Okay. They want you to actually plot it out, so you have to draw a plot here of your time. And this is what I'm going to be mostly looking at. This other stuff, like this thing right here, heck, I'd even just skip question 4. All right. I'd skip 3 and 4. I just do question 1, question 2, and then drop all the way down here and do this guy right here. All right, and then come down here and complete this stuff. So there's a lot to do here, but you can skip the 3rd and the 4th part at the top. All right. Now part 2 is even less fun because you're actually going to test your muscles to see how tired they get. You're going to need a stopwatch, a paper and a pencil, and then some type of a stress ball or a tennis ball. But if you don't have that, you can literally put nothing in your hand, or like a stuffed toy, but you're just going to open and close your hand non-stop for a while. Okay. And then answer these questions, and it's the same sort of thing. Graph it, answer the questions, and then you're done. Now, what I'd like for you guys to notice is that on the calendar, okay, that's the big thing that we're doing. Where's our calendar at? That's the big thing we're doing. Then after that, you're just going to watch some videos. I want you to watch this interactive video on how your blood flows. I want you to watch the crash course video from that guy about the circulatory system. More videos here, and then we're going to come down to the tutorial. Now, all this over here is extra, but I really think you should try to at least look through it to some degree. This gives you questions that it's like a practice for the end of course exam, which we're taking at the end of the year. Hopefully you've done them before, because I've put them in here for this class. This is a Quizlet. You've done those before. This is just a ton of stuff. It wouldn't hurt for you to look through it. Just look through it. Okay. But then we come down here to the tutorial, and the tutorial is the guide. You're going to print out the guided notes, and I'm going to go through that. But those are the only things we're doing this week. Mainly is the activity and the tutorial. They have to be completed. Remember, next Wednesday, yeah, cool music. Next Wednesday is the last day of the 9 weeks, and everything has to be submitted. Everything has to be submitted by then. So don't drag your feet on this. Get these things done, and then go back and check, because I'm actually locking you out of everything for the first 9 weeks next week, and you won't be able to go back and redo it. So your grade is going to freeze. Please make sure you get done. Okay, this tutorial, the respiratory and circulatory system. In this lesson, you develop a model to show how the circulatory and respiratory systems work together to provide oxygen to the body. We're going to start it with a warm-up question. Yes, you have to do it. A lot of you guys are skipping this and it's costing you a little bit of points on your grade. But if you've already done the assignment, the activity that we're supposed to do today, then good news. What changes occur to your breathing and heart rate during exercise, and why do you think these changes occur? You should have a little bit better answer here. And there's at least one other question there you have to do, and then we're going to jump all the way over here to page 9, the respiratory system. Have you ever noticed a number of sayings related to breathing? Don't hold your breath. When we see something incredible, it takes our breath away. Breathing is a very crucial part of your body. It's something you do on a moment-by-moment basis. If you don't believe me, just hold your breath for a few minutes. Your brain can only go for literally seconds without oxygen. Now, you say, well, Mr. Thomas, how can I hold my breath for 4 minutes? Well, that's because your body has a saturation in the blood, usually, of what we call pulse ox, or the amounts of oxygen in your blood. We don't call that pulse ox. That's a meter. But we call that the dissolved oxygen in your blood. And you have some of that stored up. So even though you're not actually breathing, your blood still has oxygen in it, and it's feeding your brain. Now your cardiovascular system is very smart, and it knows that the most important thing it has to do is to keep oxygen to your brain. So it'll actually start taking oxygen away from other places to let your brain get oxygen. If you ever ran so long that you got a little pain in your side, that's your cardiovascular system starving that area of oxygen so that you can have oxygen to your brain. And that's good in an emergency because you've got oxygen to your brain, but it's bad because that area there is actually now starving for oxygen, and it's creating acids and stuff that can actually cause damage, which is why when you push yourself, like if you're an athlete, if you push yourself, you don't want to get to that point. If you've gotten to that point, you've gone just a little too far, and you got to learn where your maximum aerobic potential is and not go past it, because after that you're not doing yourself much good. So make sure that you are understanding this is how the oxygen in the blood flow works, and you got to have it to your brain. If your brain goes literally seconds, like 2 or 3 seconds, cells start to die. Okay. Alright, respiration in this case. Now we're going to talk about respiration twice in this class. Later on we're going to talk about something called cellular respiration, which happens inside of each cell in your body. But in this case we're talking about breathing, or aerobic respiration, not aerobic, but cardiovascular respiration. And there's a process. It's pretty straightforward. When you pull air into your lungs, there's a little muscle down underneath your lungs called the diaphragm. When you contract it, it pulls down on the lungs. The lungs the pressure in the lungs drops, which means air comes in from the outside to fill in the pressure. Then your lungs are full of oxygen-rich gas, and that oxygen crosses out of the lungs and into the blood vessels and into a red blood cell. And a red blood cell is designed to do several things. But one of the main things it's designed to do is capture oxygen and hold on to it. In fact, it has a molecule called hemoglobin, and that's its job, is to grab these oxygens and hold on to them. And then it'll take it to the organs in your body through the blood system. Your body, these organs, the cells in these organs will take the oxygen, use it, and when the cells are done, they will release a waste gas called carbon dioxide, which the blood cell also grabs and then takes back to the lungs. And this all happens very rapidly, because once you breathe in, you're pulling in oxygen-rich gas. The oxygen is exchanged, the oxygen goes out, but then carbon dioxide comes in, which is why you have to exhale, and out comes carbon dioxide. This is a very rapid process, and it happens constantly in your body, and it is something that is important. And the health of your lungs and the cardiovascular system is why we study this, so you'll understand that damage to these areas because of things that you're doing, such as smoking or your diet or lack of exercise, is causing real problems. Obviously you have a whole system up here between your nose and your mouth in which oxygen can get in, but it all goes down through the larynx, the trachea, and into the lungs. And then you have areas of the lungs called the pleural cavity, the primary bronchus, the diaphragm I told you about is that muscle down here. You have the left and right lung. Behind you is the pharynx and the larynx and the epiglottis. These are all ways that we can control what goes into and out our trachea. One design flaw in humans is that the trachea is the same that we use for breathing as we use for swallowing. And so if you get something trapped in there because you've eaten it, that's how you can choke to death. They use the same airway. You have the nasal cavity, the nostril, the epiglottis, the nostril, the epiglottis. All these areas up here are designed to help you breathe in and get air, oxygen into your lungs. They have to be, excuse me, the function of the nasal cavity is to warm up the air and actually get it moist before it goes down into the lungs. In very dry places, very cold places, breathing in cold, dry air is going to dry your body out fast, and it's better to dry out the nasal cavity than it is to the lungs. And so that's why the nasal cavity has the function that it has. It's structured to add moisture, and then as it passes through, it adds warmth to the air before it gets down into the lungs. You don't want the lungs drying out and cracking. That would be very bad. The further you go, the trachea divides into the bronchi divide into the bronchioles. It's just like branches getting smaller and smaller and smaller until you get to the very end of each branch, and you get what are called the alveoli. The alveoli are these little sacs, and they're like balloons, and whenever you breathe in, these balloons kind of fill up, and then they're right next to the blood vessels, and the oxygen leaves there and goes into the blood, or the carbon dioxide leaves the blood and goes back into the alveoli, and then you exhale, and these kind of shrink and push the stuff back out. It's actually pretty straightforward, but this is called the pulmonary system because pulmonary means in relation to lungs. I just wanted to make sure that you saw that. There are pulmonary arteries, there are pulmonary veins, there are pulmonary this and pulmonary that. Whenever you hear the word pulmonary, it means it pertains to the lungs. And there's lots of parts of your body that is involved in this. It's not just the lungs and the mouth and the nose. Your brain has a center that regulates breathing. Its job is to electrically control your breathing. When your brain senses the oxygen levels in your body are low, it tells you to breathe faster. And this is all involuntary. The carotid artery goes from the body to the neck, and in fact, if you remember your pulse just a minute ago, that's one of the places you took your pulse in the activity. And the aorta contains biological sensors that detects carbon dioxide. Too much carbon dioxide, it tells your brain, hey, we're low on carbon dioxide. Your brain says, okay, breathe faster. It depends. The rate of breathing depends on how active you are, and it also depends on your health. You can be laying still, perfectly still, not having moved for days, and have low oxygen because your central nervous system is repressed and you're not breathing very well. That's why you yawn, by the way. And how many of you just yawned? I'm about to. Okay, I yawned. All right, but you could also be ill, which is causing a problem in your lungs, so you have low blood oxygen. Lots of things can cause your oxygen to be low, but the rate of breathing is one of the main things. Is controlled mostly by your activity. Okay, when you run, your body needs more energy. Skeletal muscle movements require more energy. That means more oxygen. So you breathe faster to get more oxygen because you're doing things, and it's a good thing. Exercise keeps you healthy. Don't get to my age at 50 and realize that lack of exercise and poor eating puts you in bad shape. And I'm trying to recover from that because I didn't realize just how bad eating certain things was in my life, and I've put on a little weight. I got 25 pounds more than I should, and now when I walk to the refrigerator I breathe hard, and I don't like that. So right today in this minute I'm on a kind of a diet, and it's a self-imposed diet, and I found one that I think works. But between eating right, which improves your blood health, it improves your lung health, and exercising, you'll find out that you're going to feel better if you exercise. I mean, doesn't a squirrel look happy? Kind of weird. Almost all living things need oxygen to survive, and the history of how oxygen got into the atmosphere is a whole other story. But most of the atmosphere, by the way, these are the layers of the atmosphere, which I guess they put there to show you that there's a thing called an atmosphere, and we live in the troposphere. But most of the gas that we breathe is not oxygen. It's only about 21%. The other 78% of it is mostly nitrogen, which we don't need. It doesn't hurt us. We don't need, but it's just kind of there. A very small part is carbon dioxide, or carbon, and that's going to be important when we talk about some things later, and I want you to remember that. A very, very, like less than 1% of the air we breathe is oxygen. It's actually about half a percent. I'm sorry, is carbon. It's actually about 0.5% of it is carbon. So there's not much carbon in the atmosphere. And people talk about global warming and climate change that's caused by carbon in the atmosphere. There's not much there, and that's why it's so important that we keep track of this, because if there's not much there, if we add just a little bit more, then that's we can add a lot more carbon than supposed to be there, and it has a real effect. Now when we exhale, we expel carbon dioxide, but there's still a lot of oxygen. When you exhale, the air coming out of your mouth still has quite a bit of oxygen, because your lungs just didn't get it all. You breathe in, your lungs get what they get, and then you breathe out, and there's still a lot of carbon, or a lot of oxygen in there. That's why CPR is so effective, because I can, and if you're not CPR certified, you should get that way one day, but I'm certified, and I know that I can do what's called rescue breathing, and the air coming out of my lungs going, if I force it into the victim's lungs, there's still a lot of oxygen in there, and that's how we can save a person's life using cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Of course, you know what the circulatory system is, but it is the veins in your body that carry blood away from your heart. Those are called the arteries, right? They carry blood away from your heart. That blood is oxygen rich, it's nutrient rich, and it goes and it's pushed all through your body. Every cell in your body is within just it's like streets, okay? You almost have a street going by every house. Well, you have a blood vessel going by almost every blood cell. And that's how it has to work. They get smaller and smaller to where they're microscopic, and they're called capillaries. That's why when you get cut anywhere, you bleed, because there's blood going everywhere. I mean, I'm looking, I'm not wearing any shoes right now, so I'm looking at the very tip of my big toe, and the very tip of my big toe has to have blood. And so between my heart and there is a series of veins and arteries which connects it and makes like a two-way circuit, so that I can push oxygen-rich blood out to my body, and I can pull the oxygen-low blood back into my heart to go to my lungs and get re-oxygenated. So I know you've seen all this before, but we're going to go through it again real fast. Right in the middle of your chest, your lungs are on the outside, your heart is on the inside. Your heart has 4 chambers. There's all these arteries and veins around it. We're going to talk about that briefly a little bit. Blood itself contains all kinds of cells. Blood is not like Kool-Aid. It's not a mixture like that. It's actually full of little chunks. In a microscopic level, if you could zoom yourself down, you could see blood cells, red blood cells, white blood cells, all kinds of little bitty other things floating around. It's certainly not just one thing. It's a whole bunch of things floating around in stuff called plasma. Now we want to talk about the veins mostly, and so I meant the vessels. There are 2 types of vessels, the arteries and the veins, and they all are basically the same. They have what's called smooth muscle, which around each one, which allows each vein or artery to kind of contract or expand. Okay, we call this dilation, and depending on what's going on in your body, depending on certain things. But these are very flexible tubes that can get larger or smaller depending on need. The funny thing is, the sad thing is the older you get, this inner layer here gets harder. It's called atherosclerosis. It gets harder and harder and harder, and after a while they can't expand and shrink like they should. And it's like old water hoses, they start to break down, and they can almost get brittle, and they get clogged up, and that kills you, called a heart attack. The leading cause of death in the US, by the way. Arteries go away from the heart. They carry blood away from the heart. They're usually oxygen rich. Now they're drawn here as red and blue, but please, please, please do not think that oxygenated blood is red and low oxygen blood is blue. It is not. Blood is always red. It's very bright red when it's full of oxygen, and it's kind of more of a maroon when it's low on oxygen, but it does not ever become blue. The other thing I want you to notice about veins is they have these little valves. And these valves are important because when the heart squeezes, it pushes blood out through the arteries, so there's plenty of pressure. But the heart is a muscle. It only contracts. It does not suck blood back into it. It contracts and relaxes. So as the blood is coming back to the heart through the veins, there are these valves that don't let the blood rush backwards. It pulls this way and stops, pulls this way and stops, pulls this way and stops. And these valves help us to get blood back into the heart. They're absolutely crucial. So the valves are an important part of veins. Veins carry the blood back to the heart, and these valves make it where it's easier for it to do. So here we talk more about arteries and veins, and there's really not much to add. Arteries carry blood away from the heart, veins carry blood, back to the heart. But interestingly, in your body, in between there are these things called capillaries. They're much smaller. If arteries and veins would be like Interstate 95 or the Turnpike, huge roadways, these are like small country roads, and they can actually get very small. But remember, they go to every cell, so it's like streets. You know, every house has to have a street going to it, otherwise how would you get there? If there was a house with no street, could you take things to it or get things away from it? Cells are the same way. And if any of these get blocked, then what's going to happen to the cell? You're right, it's going to die. So capillaries are everywhere, and I'm talking about every single part of your body has these capillaries for us to get blood to. You can click on and read about them here, and you need to. Then, of course, there's the heart. You've already studied it, but I want to remind you there are 4 chambers in the heart, 2 atriums and 2 ventricles. The heart has a different type of muscle. It's called cardiac muscle. It's not the same as the muscles we find in the veins and the arteries. And it's designed more for continual use. Your heart has beat nonstop since before you were born, unless you've had some type of a weird trauma or accident. Your heart has never stopped. Now imagine if you had to do that with your arm, it would never stop. Imagine if you had to do, like, just lift your arm up and down or flex your hand like you're going to do in the activity this week. Imagine if you just could never stop that. The muscles of our arms, our skeletal muscle is not designed to do that. Cardiac muscle is. It's designed to just go non-stop. Okay. The ventricles and the atria, these things all have an important role, and there's a cycle in which the blood flows through. And depending on how they're contracted, this is how blood gets pushed, and it's happening in your body right now, I guarantee it. The left side of the heart takes blood from the lungs and squeezes it and pushes it out through the aorta, the largest artery, and sends it out to the body. It's full of oxygenated blood. The right side of the heart pulls the low oxygen blood in and then pushes it to the lungs. So blood comes into the left side, the left ventricle, then the left aorta, left atrium, sorry. Do I have that backwards? Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm saying that, I mean right. The right side carries the low oxygen, so the right side, the left ventricle, the right ventricle, the right aorta, oh God, I can't even say this right. Alright, let me try it again, and you can follow along. The right atrium, then the right ventricle, then out to the lungs. Then back to the lungs to the left atrium, then the left ventricle, then to the rest of the body. If it helps, atrium is kind of like an anteroom. It's kind of like a porch. You know, the atrium is like a little room before you get into the big room, and that's what the word literally means. And so the blood comes into the right atrium from the body, then the right ventricle, then out to the lungs, then come back from the lungs into the left atrium, then into the left ventricle, then out to the rest of the body. There's all kinds of valves and stuff that control the flow of this. You've got the tricuspid valve here, and there's another valve here, the pulmonary valve. There's valves all over the place, and each one of these valves is designed to keep the blood flowing in one direction. That's why they're like one-way valves. The blood can flow through this way, but it can't go back. And when you hear your heartbeat, you're actually hearing the lub in lub-dub, lub-dub, lub-dub. The first lub is actually this valve closing. The second lub is this valve closing, right? And we can tell an awful lot about what may be wrong with your heart just by listening to how that valve closes. Some people, that valve doesn't work right, so instead of hearing a lub, you hear more like a lush, and that's because the valve doesn't quite close and the blood flows back out here. And there's a lot of people who have to have heart valve surgery. A lot of people, my stepmother has a cow valve put right there, taken out of a cow's heart and put there because hers didn't work right. Now, a lot of this you can just read, but there are some larger arteries and veins. The main artery going away from the heart is called the aorta. It's the largest one. It's huge because it handles a huge volume of blood, and then it starts breaking off into all the little pieces that goes up to the rest of the body. By the way, all mammals have a very similar shaped heart, and the aorta of a great blue whale is so big that a human could swim through it. Isn't that crazy? Coming into the heart from the lower part of the body is called the inferior vena cava. That's the artery that brings the blood from the lower part of the body. The superior vena cava comes from the upper part of the body, including the brain. Now, the one thing you need to know is, you know the rules. You know the rule about artery away. Artery carries oxygenated blood away from the heart. Okay. Well, and that's still true with the pulmonary artery and the pulmonary vein, except that the pulmonary artery does carry blood away from the heart, but it carries it to the lungs, which means it has low oxygen. Every other artery carries oxygen-rich blood away from the body, but not the pulmonary artery, because it carries blood away from the body, but it's low oxygen to the lungs. And the pulmonary vein carries blood back to the heart from the lungs. So veins go to the heart, but in this case, this is the one vein that carries oxygen-rich blood because it's coming from the lungs. Most veins carry oxygen-poor blood, but in this case, they carry oxygen-rich blood. And remember, I don't like this last picture here, but remember that blood low in oxygen is not blue just because we draw it this way. It's just drawn so you can see a difference. Alright, so you can listen to the heart sound here. I wonder if, yeah, you hear that? Lub-dub, lub-dub, lub-dub. Okay, that's, I don't know when it stops. When it stop. Oh, I guess I have to push it again. So it tells you the atrioventricular valves are the lub, and then the other valves are the dub. That's how we get these heart sounds. And like I said, you can learn a lot about people and their hearts. The whole heart is controlled by electricity coming from your brain. And so you have all these nodes around the heart that are wired to the brain through nerves, and they fire and they cause the muscles to contract. And this is called the SA node. Then there's the AV node, there's the HIS bundle. There's just all kinds of stuff going on here. And you can, when you do like, if you've ever seen somebody do an electrocardiogram or an ECG or an EKG, then this is what they're tracking, is how the electricity flows across the heart. And here's an example of that. And as the electricity goes from the top right down to the lower left, it causes the heart to beat in the proper format. So the electricity is injected here at the top, and it goes across the heart. And this is backwards. Well, this is the top right and the lower left. So as it goes across there, we can measure it, and we can see all these little peaks, and they're called waves. You got, and they're labeled QRS, TU, VW, X, Y, and Z, whatever. And so when you put these little things on your chest, it measures these for you, and you can read so much about somebody's heart and the health of their heart just by watching as the electricity passes across. I've had this done several times. I've had a little bit of heart problems in the past. The good news is they're better. My heart's better. When I was back in college, I was working hard. I had a wife and 4 kids and a baby on the way, and I was working 2 jobs, and I drove to Orlando, and yeah, I was under a little stress, and it was causing my waves to be inverted, and inverted waves are bad. My doctor was freaking out. So he said, look, you got to calm down. And he tried to give me some medicine, but I didn't. But you can take medicine to calm down. But I learned how to reduce the stress in my life, and now my EKG looks perfect. But there was a time in my life where it was a little scary. Now, and all that is measuring how the electricity passes across the heart. It's kind of crazy what we can learn. We've been doing this for 100 years. Well, we've had EKGs around for 65, 70 years at least. Alright, we're going to talk a little bit about what blood actually is. If you were to take some of your blood, I don't know if you've ever seen people give blood. I give blood all the time because I have a very rare blood type. But if you were to draw some blood out of your body and put it into what's this thing called? You know, one of these things. Why can't I? God, I have a million of these. Test tube, there we go. And you put it into a test tube and then put it into a centrifuge and spin it. The heavy stuff will go to the bottom, the light stuff goes to the top. And so you can see that it's broken up. But a lot of it, almost 50% of the volume of the blood, is just plasma, and it has all kinds of stuff in it, but it's just mostly the liquid that everything floats in. Okay, so you know, in your bloodstream, all this stuff is mixed up and moves around. But if we separate it, this is what we'll see, right? And inside of the plasma, there's things like proteins, glucose, vitamins, minerals, hormones. But most of what's in there is water. Of this 50% right here, 49.5%, half of that is water. Okay, so 25% of your blood is just water, right? And everything else. So when we get down here, we've got other stuff. We got leukocytes. That's involved in your immune system. You got thrombocytes. Those are the things that cause your blood to clot, right? So if you ever get a scab, it's made out of thrombocytes and stuff. You got fats, sugars, salt. You got proteins in here. Of course, there's a plasma down here. You have the erythrocytes. Those are actually the red blood cells. They're heaviest, so they sink to the bottom. Okay. Now your blood would never be found this way, and right now this blood wouldn't work because the blood cells are all piled on top of each other, and they're probably dying right now. So this isn't how your blood normally exists. Normally, all this stuff is suspended inside of the plasma in your arteries and your veins as they're moving through your body doing their job. So some stuff in there. There's these platelets. The platelets are part of helping to clot. When you get cut, there's this stuff called thrombulin that creates like a spider web, and then it starts catching these platelets, and these platelets kind of get stuck into it, and then they create like a scab that goes over it, and that's how you keep from just losing blood. And there are people that are called free bleeders. They don't have the thrombulin. So the thrombulin, and here they're calling it fibrin, but it's basically the same thing. The thrombulin, the fibrin, they don't form, and so nothing catches these platelets or anything else coming out, so as a result they don't stop bleeding. Isn't that crazy? We developed a fake stuff, a synthetic fibrin type of stuff to use for the military. Like if you're in the field, you can get this stuff. I have some of it. I forget what it's called, but it's like a powder. Like if you, it's called quick clot. That's what it's called. If you get cut, you can pour this on a cut, and it will help seal the cut like a scab would very fast, right? People who are free bleeders actually carry it around in a pin, just like people carry around an EpiPen. They carry these around, and if they ever get cut, they can actually give themselves a shot, and it'll give them enough stuff to where it'll cause them to stop bleeding enough to get treated by a doctor. People used to die from it. They would just bleed to death. You couldn't stop them. Another thing are the white blood cells. These are like big, I don't know, they're like big globs of snot. But what they do is, one of the ways they deal with infections is they literally just go kind of wrap around the bacteria or the virus and just eat it. that's what's in your blood, and it's very effective. If it weren't for these, you would be much sicker than you get. And so the last thing we're going to talk about is diseases of the blood system, the cardiovascular system. One of the main ones is called hypertension, and it creates real problems inside of your bloodstream. Essentially, what can cause this are all kinds of stuff. Genetics are actually the main one. One of the main reasons that people end up with hypertension and high blood pressure and hardened arteries, and they end up having heart attacks and strokes, is just genetics. Sadly, that's the greatest predictor that we can when it comes to predicting whether or not you're going to have heart diseases and stuff, is genetics. And I am blessed to come from a family that does not have heart problems. I'm 50 years old, and I'm still doing very well. I know a lot of people my age that come from a different type of situation, and they're really struggling with heart problems. They're really struggling with obesity. And people that struggle with obesity, it's not just because they're bad lifestyle choices, although that does contribute. But a lot of times people are just naturally that way. Your gender has a lot to do with it. Whether you're a male or a female, males tend to have higher risk of these types of things than females. So now there is a lot of stuff in your life that you can do. So if you are genetically come from a family that has heart disease, that doesn't mean that you're going to die at 50 years old. You can do quite well. In fact, we've finally gotten to the point where we can now live with this type of disease, and you'll have a very long, happy life if you're very careful. It's just some people have to be more careful than others because of genetics. Some things that you can watch is too much sodium in the diet. Everybody puts salt in everything. Everything has salt. If you don't believe me, just next time you eat something, look at the package. It'll tell you how much sodium is in it. And we consume way too much sodium in our lives. Okay, not 2,000 years ago, sodium was so hard to get, salt was so hard to get, that it was Roman soldiers would get paid a portion of their salary in salt. In fact, the word salary, S-A-L-A-R-Y, is named after the word salt. So people used to get paid. Okay, you ever heard somebody say you're worth your salt? Well, that's what it means. I'm paying you. You're worth it, right? So 2,000 years ago, you couldn't get enough salt in your diet. It was valuable. Today, it's everywhere, and we eat far too much of it. There's salt in everything. I went to get a salad at Burger King the other day, and I looked at the salt, and I was like, oh my God, look at all the salt in this salad at Burger King. So it's everywhere, even in candy, even in soft drinks. It's full of sodium. All right. Another thing is stress. Stress is the thing that I deal with, and it causes a huge problem. It causes chemicals to show up in your blood called cortisol that can lead to real problems in your cardiovascular health. Being overweight or obese always puts a problem on people. It puts a lot of strain on the cardiovascular system. And then smoking, anything including vape cigarettes, smoking probably causes the most damage. And this is the one that makes me the most upset, because there's no point in it. I've lived my entire life without smoking and I'm just fine. Why do you need to smoke? When you put that kind of stuff in your body, it causes unbelievable, it's like polluting your body. You wouldn't believe the amount of stuff that goes into your lungs and into your blood, and it's a real problem. Alcohol and caffeine can also contribute, but it's only like if you abuse it. And I'm going to go ahead and admit that smoking as well, only if you abuse it. If the occasional cigar to celebrate something, these are considered okay. But when you are doing it all day, your heavy drinking or your heavy smoking constantly can cause real problems with that. And yeah, too much caffeine, although not as bad, too much caffeine can cause problems as well. Now, here's one of the main things that happens. Notice this is very simply, look, if this were a garden hose, look at how wide open, okay, the end of the hose is, and stuff can flow through here just fine. But if it were all clogged up with stuff, could stuff flow through here just as well? Remember, this is our blood. This carries the oxygen and the food and the water to our cells. And remember what I told you about the brain? The brain needs, it can't go more than a couple of seconds before cells start to die. Well, don't you want a pretty good flow of oxygen to your brain? But because of lifestyle mostly, but also genetics, we get this stuff called atherosclerosis. And this is what atherosclerosis is. Stuff just starts to build up on the inside wall of the artery, and as a result, blood can't flow quite as well. And before long, it'll keep building up, and then finally it just closes, and then no blood is flowing. No blood flows to your brain, you get a stroke. No blood flows to your heart, you get a heart attack. That's how it goes. There is another problem with our blood system, our cardiovascular system, that's caused in other ways. I had a cousin that died from this. It's called an aneurysm, and that happens when there's too much pressure put on the artery for various reasons, and it can actually cause the artery to rupture and burst. Think of it as kind of like those hot dog shaped balloons that clowns play with. Those do pretty well, but they reach a point where something fails, and if it fails inside of your brain and the blood starts flowing in your brain, then it's not going where it's supposed to go, and it can cause you to have a stroke caused by an aneurysm. I have a cousin who was very healthy, wonderful person, but in childbirth, because of all the activity and the pushing involved in childbirth, she had an aneurysm, and she passed away from it, bless her heart. It was a very sad situation, but it's not because of anything having to do with her lifestyle. She just had an aneurysm. So lots of ways that people can get, lots of problems that can go wrong with the blood vessels, the cardiovascular system in your body. And that's the end of it. I know this was long, 45 minutes by this time it's all done, and I know that you guys probably don't normally like watching all this, but you need to. This carries you through some difficult stuff. And so take the time to watch it, and as you go through the tutorial. Alright, get everything done. The 9 weeks is ending next week. I've already explained all that. So I will see you next week with another video. I am still doing every day. It's almost 9 o'clock right now for me, and so every day I am still doing the Zoom room. I send you an email with a link, and if you need to pop in and just say hi and ask me some questions, then that's the place to do it at. So please make sure that you're Zooming with me if you have any problems, or if you are not understanding something in the material. Alright, have a nice week. I'll see you next week.